Oh, should we have addressed the fact that BattleBots is cancelled or not?
No. Just get us dragged into a conversation. Everyone knows it. It isn't like people are going to go, ha, those fools, they haven't realised. This is about a personal journey I've been on with the Antweight class. That's what this is.
I'm really excited because it was a little while ago you had been like, Antweights are rubbish, they're terrible, it's too restrictive trying to build in the cube. And then you go and you built one and now you've competed.
And I was good at it, sort of.
You did really well, man.
I am genuinely very pleased with how it went.
Good.
I feel like we just started. I don't know. This is confusing.
Well, we can be started. If you're comfortable with that, if you want to spend a bit of time warming up, we can avoid this topic for a moment.
I'm fully warmed up. I just want to make sure that we've got sufficient context in place before just like launching into half a conversation.
Who needs context? Well, you can lay the groundwork then. I don't know what context people need. You built an Antweight. Like, if they follow us on Twitter, they know what happened.
Well, when you put it that way, yes, but I still refuse to believe that anyone knows who we are or what we're doing.
Hi, I'm Sam.
Hi, I'm not Sam.
Hi, not Sam. So I hear you've built an Antweight recently.
Yes, and I still don't know why. I genuinely don't know why I built this and entered AWS 61, but at some point I clearly did. I think it was just the fact that I found out it was nearby. I was told it was really easy to get to, and that turned out not to be true because it was on a Sunday. Don't ask me why events are on a Sunday. Please don't organise your events on a Sunday. It's really hard to get to. But I was able to sort that out. I built the true version of Tropical Storm Phil out of real materials, not foam board, and had a surprisingly nice time.
Excellent. I'm really glad. I want to... You said you built Tropical Storm Phil out of real materials, and I have to know everything you've experienced about working with titanium.
Titanium is a hell of a material. Now, I played the eBay lottery and bought what was listed as grade 5 titanium, fully expecting it not to be. Now, I'm not an expert on titanium. I can't say for sure that what I got was grade 5, but if it isn't, I never want grade 5. Working with this stuff was nigh on impossible. I started off trying to cut it with a fairly cheap hacksaw, and I think it took me about 15 minutes to make a 30mm cut. And I gave up on that. But then I I slept on it a few nights, and I thought to myself, you know what? I really want to throw some bright white sparks. So I went out and bought a better hacksaw. And that better hacksaw, to be fair, got through it. At which point I then realised that I still needed to drill it. Once again, look, this is really a story of a lack of equipment, to be honest. Drilling it was another adventure in itself because I only had a 2mm bit and a 7mm bit. Nothing in between.
Do you even have a drill?
Yes, I did drill with a drill. I wasn't just like picking up a drill bit and spinning it really fast in my fingers.
Sorry, let me clarify. Do you have an electric drill? I wasn't sure, because I genuinely... Whenever we've built anything, we've always just used all of my tools. So I genuinely have no idea what you have access to.
The drill I was using is better than yours.
Oh, well, I see how it is. Mr. Fan. Oh, is it your DeWalt thing that we saw?
Yeah, it's a really nice drill. As I learned when I started actually, drilling plastics with it and it wasn't a painful process. I was like, oh, okay, a good quality drill does actually make a difference. But with the titanium, oh, man... It took about... So this is 1mm titanium. It took a good 5 or 6 minutes to make a 2mm hole.
Wow.
And even though I'd centre punched properly and all of that, it still wandered by about 3mm. It was just a nightmare from start to finish. I was only making holes in it so that I could cut a slot out. And the big thing I would do now, if I was going to work with titanium again, which I am, because I've just ordered some more for another Antweight build.
Oh, blimey.
Mate, panic buying. Genuinely. I was like, I could have a lot of time off soon and not much to do with it. I need robot parts. So I was doing this in my break at work today. But that's a boring topic.
Maybe I should have bought some brushless motors.
There's still time, I'm sure.
We'll see.
So yeah, where was I? I think working with titanium, if I was going to do it again, I would just not go for the complex shape that I was going for. If you look at a photo of the titanium wedge that I built, it's a lot of unnecessary cutting for what it actually does.
Yeah, because it's nicely shaped down the bottom, and then you've got that slot for the weapon to articulate through.
Yeah, so it was a complex shape. It involved a lot of work that it shouldn't have, but getting that thing made was still 3 or 4 hours work. And this is an interesting thing that I've learned about building outweights. It's not significantly faster than building a beetle. I really think I could have built a crappy beetle in about the same time.
But instead, you built a competent antweight.
I know, which is still a shock to us all. I must say, I didn't enjoy the build process very much.
Why?
I don't know. I think the fiddliness of it got to me. And I think I had, well, to be fair, I always have. And I don't know how much of this is the fact I was building an outweight, and I don't know how much of it was the fact I was building it alone. I think I got a lot of anxiety over solving a few of the problems. And maybe having someone there to discuss them with and to encourage me to just try solutions would have made that a bit better. But I think the fiddliness is a thing, and one of the big issues I had was just being able to close the robot. Because if you're doing something like a beetle, you build all your frame, it's quite thick, you need to put a lid on, and of course you need to be able to access it from the outside to close it. So our solution has always been screw down into the thick bits of plastic.
Yeah.
That sort of thing isn't really an option with the ant. So I had to find ways of actually, getting a bolt or a nut captive. And the solution I came up with in the end was completely accidental and completely stupid, which was that the weapon axle was actually the thing retaining the top plate.
Is that the drill bit that you said you'd explain and then never did?
Oh, yeah. Yes, the unexplained drill bit, exactly. And I'd love to explain it now, but I honestly can't. It just happened, and it was a huge weight off my mind when it did. The whole weapon setup, by the way, is a solution that I'm really proud of. Because I realised, once I started putting the servo in, that I couldn't do what I did on the foam board version, which was just have an arm coming straight off of the servo. That was going to put the pivot halfway up the robot, and I didn't want that. I now know, actually, from competing with it, it probably wouldn't have made that much difference. But at the time, with my design head on, it was like, I need to do something about that. And that meant that I had to install a pivot somewhere.
Yeah.
And I was already struggling with the fiddliness of everything, so I was just like, how on earth am I going to do that? And I needed to get it as near the front as possible, where there's much less space, which meant it all had to be quite low profile, which meant the precision that it would have required was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Eventually, I essentially cheated, took a motor mount, cut it down a bit, and drilled through it. And that's actually what the weapon pivot is, just then sort of bolted onto the top plate with a notch on the bottom for it to run through.
I see, yeah, so that's one of the the plastic motor mounts that come with those N20 gear motors, aren't they? Like the ones that people tend to use just for clamping those down.
Yep, exactly, like 50p's worth of plastic, very well spent.
Yeah, nice. Nice.
And now I look back on it, a lot of design decisions I made with this robot really worked out in Arena. Having the big wheels really worked out for me, because it gave me a lot of flexibility with the body design and the internals, which then resulted in a lower profile where somehow I was getting under basically every opponent. And if I'd tried to go with small wheels and get everything sort of worked out that way, I would not have ended up doing that.
I think if you used smaller wheels, you would have like less ground clearance across the whole robot, which would mean you're more likely to sort of get, not beached, but, like have something prop up under the centre of the robot, lifting your front end up, if you know what I mean. Whereas I guess by having bigger wheels, you sort of like lift the rear of your robot a little bit, which means that you're definitely running like ground scraping along the front all the time, really, aren't you? Does that make sense? Am I making any sense? Who knows?
Yeah, I think that was more of an advantage to me, not in terms of being worried about getting sort of stranded on stuff in Arena, mostly because I didn't fight any destructive robots. I only fought sort of wedges and flippers. Maybe I would have been more concerned about that if pieces of me were getting ripped off to get stuck on. I think for me it was more about that fact that I could... Yeah, it gave me a lot more flexibility, for example, when I was setting the weapon up, because it gave me space underneath the robot to work with, and space outside of that kind of internal cell where you want the electronics to be. The other decision that really worked out for me was putting ballast on the front. Because I was finally able to control the wheeling. If I couldn't have controlled the wheeling, I would have been in so much trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole robot really works out. The only issue I had in Arena at any point was when, after putting the acetate on the front... Actually, I don't know how aware of this people are, but in Outweights, it's very common to put a thin piece of acetate, which is just thin plastic, on the front lip of your wedge to get under things.
Yeah.
And it seems like designs that don't or can't do that are basically screwed if they're trying to get under things. It's pretty much a necessity. And I did that very last minute. I didn't do it on the foam board one and regretted it, so I did it, but I left it till the end because it seemed like almost an aesthetic touch. And I didn't test my self-writing after that was there. And it did actually mess up the geometry to the point where I couldn't self-write.
Yeah, because I saw that fight. I remember, like you said in your video, that you've tested self-writing from every angle, and then you didn't self-write, and I was like, what's changed? So yeah, the acetate on the front, yeah. It's amazing. You were obviously pretty close with your original design then, without the acetate. You were really close to the limits of like self-writing from that angle then, I guess.
Oh yeah, absolutely, which is kind of where I liked it being. Because it meant that I was using as much length as possible, which was keeping that angle shallow to get under things. So I saw that as being optimised, and it turned out to be slightly flawed. But that was a really easy fix. I just extended the flipper arm.
Yeah.
And that was just enough to get it back over. Although I did have to extend it twice because the first time wasn't enough.
Smooth. Did you have any problems? So like, the way the arm works is you have like the actual arm that's pivoting on the drill bit at the bottom, and then the servo pushing against the back of that little arm. Did you have any problem with those two things going out of plane, so that the servo like bit behind it sort of slipped around the side and poked through without actually moving the arm at any point, or not?
I think it was happening, but it wasn't a problem, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So I was a bit overzealous when I was making the flipper arm. It was a 1.5mm axle, and I drilled it out to 2 just to make it a bit more loose and sort of have less resistance, but that gave it a lot of sideways wobble. So I ended up, quote unquote, fixing that by just getting some sort of 1.5mm bits of polycarb and stacking them kind of like washers either side. And that pretty much held it firm, but it did still wobble a little. But because it was so close to this arm on the servo anyway, it couldn't really get far enough out of line. The only times it seemed to get out of line far enough were at the very extension of the flipper, where its work was kind of done anyway. And when I was self-writing, because the arm on the servo was actually longer than the flipper arm, it was always the arm on the servo that was doing the self-writing anyway.
Okay, yeah, okay.
I did consider, and I had the weight to do a lot of different things, I did consider kind of putting a panel on the flipper, if that makes sense. So it's a flipper arm, and then I would have put a sort of polycarb panel on it. Which,
what, to make the actual contact area wider?
Yeah, both with opponents and with the arm that was moving it. But I realised that that would then be introducing a sort of second step up to get onto the arm. And I didn't want to do that. I could then have put it on the rear side instead, but because the arm needed to sort of slot down through the top panel, that would have had to have started so far up that it would have been basically useless anyway. So I ended up just keeping it as the 2 arms. I think if I did the robot again, I would want a solid linkage rather than just arm pushes arm and fishing line pulls back.
You mean the fishing line wasn't the perfect solution?
It was the most on-brand solution.
I love that you found a way to put fishing line in this robot.
Always. It was the perfect solution to the situation that I'd created.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
If I had longer to work on the robot, because I did end up finishing it the day before, even though I didn't really intend to. Had I given myself longer, I would have been playing around with different linkages where I wouldn't have needed that. And what I saw a lot of at the event was people with much smarter linkages that resulted in much faster actuation of their weapon. And that's something that I think I could fairly easily emulate.
Yeah, I guess if you had like a solid linkage a bit further down, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So something that is connecting to the flipper arm much nearer the pivot.
Yeah.
It's really hard to explain in podcast form. I hope people have a fairly intuitive understanding of how these things work. But basically, people were kind of using 4-bar setups, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I can see the sort of system in my head for what you would do. But that is a bit more, that is obviously a bit more complicated, and I can imagine that being super fiddly to set up as well. So
I also don't know where the limits would be in terms of the torque of the servo. So the servo I was using is just one that I had left over from the last version, which is, I think, 1.5 kilos per centimetre, which seems like it should be plenty, but I don't have a very intuitive understanding of what sort of losses come from creating those systems.
I think that would be plenty, but yeah, like you sort of see all like kilograms per centimetre, and it's like, it means it can hold, I think this is what it means. It means it can hold a kilogram when you've got that a centimetre away from the pivot point. But yeah, that because it's I think it sort of degrades in like a square law type thing. It's one of those inverse square type things, I think. So it sort of gets.
I assumed it was linear, so I thought if you could hold 1 kilo a centimetre away from the pivot, you could hold 100 grams 10 centimetres away. But the fact that I'm not sure about that is exactly why I didn't mess with it.
I'm not sure either. My intuition is that it's not linear, is that you lose torque really, really quickly. But I don't know. I've not done a lot of work with servos, so who knows?
That would also make sense. I was hoping to use a stronger servo, just because I figure overkill is the best approach when you don't really know what you're doing. Which ended up arriving, I think I came back home to them yesterday, so Monday, the day after the event.
Oh god, that hurts about as much as when I arrived back after Fuey to find the wheels that we ordered.
It is the worst, the absolute worst.
So annoying.
But yeah, what that does mean is that I've now got time and equipment to play around with this quite a lot. Although I kind of just want to leave this robot in parc ferme, because it works, and it seems to work quite well.
Yeah.
So I have today, like I said, just sort of panic bought all the components to just do a new ant.
Are you going to do, will the new one be another version of Tropical Storm Phil, or are you going to do a different robot? Have you got any sort of thoughts on what you want to do next?
So long term, I have a different robot I want to do, based purely on having a good name for it. But in the meantime, I want to sort of create a test bed to work on some different flipper setups.
Yeah. Awesome.
And in that respect, I'm really torn between sticking with the front hinge, because it's a design I like and a design there should be more of, and going to a rear hinge that looks way more fun to use.
Yeah, those rear hinge ones look like a laugh, especially with like ant weights. They go so quickly, flapping around. I don't know. I really like Tropical Storm Phil. Like I think the front hinge is brilliant, and there's not, like you said, there's not an enormous number of them, and so it's sort of a bit more memorable, I think.
The problem with it is that I didn't really use the weapon. Well, I used it in some ways, but not as a flipper very much. It took until my 5th and final fight for me to actually flip someone with the weapon. I flipped people by being a wedge, but up until that point I hadn't flipped anyone using the weapon. What I had done was kind of use the weapon to configure the wedge, if that makes sense. So there were a lot of times where I would have an opponent near the pit, and rather than trying to get under and flip them into the pit, I would just sort of preemptively put the weapon up.
Yeah.
So that I would just scoop under them a little and then push.
Yeah, then you've got like a wall that you can push them around with. Yeah.
And the one time I tried to not do that, I don't know if I should go through my fights in order or not, but you know what I'm like.
This is the problem you have every time we talk about something like this, is you get really into your own head about whether or not what you're saying makes sense.
So, we should do it freeform. No, we should do it in order. But we should do it freeform. We should do it in order. So I came into this very nervous about driving. And as a result, my approach became very cautious, which I think turned out to be a strength. But my first defeat, I think I could have turned into a win by being more aggressive. So when I came up against a similar robot from essentially the same team later on, I decided to be more aggressive, and I lost the fight because of it. I went for a proper charge for the pit, and they just ended up ramping straight over me, and I bounced off a wall and in. I will, by the way, have in the show notes links to footage of all the fights. They're like 15 seconds long each. Anyone's got time to watch them.
And they're worth watching.
See, they genuinely are.
They are. No, I'm not. I'm serious. Like I was always excited whenever I knew one of your fights was coming up. I was tuning in. I was excited to see you fight.
So this, I suppose, hits on the wider point of my attitude towards antweights. I've never enjoyed watching antweight competitions. There are individual fights that I've enjoyed, particularly memorable ones that people will link you to, and I kind of go, yeah, that's a good fight. Or there might be a particular robot that I'm excited to see and I will enjoy watching all of its fights. I think, as a spectator, they can be very interesting if there's a thing you're already looking for. But to just sit and watch, 4 hours worth of fights, I couldn't do it. I can do it at the event. At the event, it's great. But just watching on YouTube? No, and I still don't think I could. What I think I've really learned from this is that antweights are a class for the competitor's enjoyment.
It's so fast, because I watched maybe half an hour in the beginning of the day. I had it on in the morning and was watching. I watched a good number of fights, and I was blown away at the pace of it all. It's so fast. It's just fight, almost at that speed in some ways. It's so quick, and that keeps it interesting for a little while. I found the format a bit confusing, and I couldn't track anything because I'm lazy. But yeah.
Double elimination is not an easy thing to follow, and it's made even harder by the fact you've got over 100 robots competing.
Yeah,
unless you've been to a bunch of the events, you're not going to know what most of the robots are, which means you're not necessarily going to be able to track where you are in the competition.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem. So, I think as I've gotten more involved in this kind of stuff, I'm able to watch more recorded live event stuff because I know more of the people there and I know the robots they've built. And so, like you say, once you've got something you're looking out for, it's a lot easier to get in there and stay watching. And obviously, I was watching because I wanted to see how you got on and stuff. So I watched a few for that, and then obviously, yeah, you messaged whenever you were about to fight, and I'd watched a few fights. Apart from that one, but you watched, I'd watch a few fights before that and a few fights after it as well, and it was it's a very intense competition. That's the thing that really blew me away. It's the intensity of it all.
And that's the thing that really struck me, not just the intensity of watching, the intensity of being involved.
Yeah.
Now, I've not driven in any proper Beetleweight fights, but I feel like watching you drive is basically the same intensity. And in a Beetleweight... well, put it this way, driving in the Gladiator at UE was not an intense experience.
No, I don't suppose it was.
The difference for me between a Beetleweight fight and an Antweight fight is that a Beetleweight fight is almost always going to last more than 30 seconds, and you know it as you drive. Because the only thing that's going to kill you is a really spectacular hit or a really stupid mechanical failure or electrical failure. The pit is not going to open for the first 30 seconds. You have got the freedom of that arena to drive around and be tactical and do whatever you think you need to do. In an Antweight fight, from the first second, you could screw it up and put yourself out immediately.
See, now I saw that happen in one fight, and they restarted. What are the rules around? If you happen to go straight into the pit without contact, do they restart under that condition, or is it up to the people involved? What happens there? Do you know? There
has to be contact in a fight. So if a hilariously unbalanced spinner spins up and catapults itself straight over a wall, that's a reset. There were also a couple of situations where I think there was literally a time where a fight started and someone realised they hadn't turned their robot on. and the other competitor then could have just finished that fight. But instead, the other competitor just went, well, I haven't made contact, so let's restart. So I think it kind of gets used in a few ways, that rules. And again, the whole ethos is let's have a good fight. No one wants a fight to end because someone drove straight in the pit. But if you drive into your opponent and then straight into the pit, that's fair game. And that was my biggest fear. Every time I've driven a robot sort of in one of the kitchens, either yours or mine, I just floor it everywhere, have no control, and go, well, I can't drive then. Put me in that situation, and suddenly I am nursing that stick.
Oh, you managed to not go full throttle, did you?
Yeah, which I've never done before.
I still haven't done it. Even in fights, I am incapable of not going full throttle.
I think if you had a controllable amp weight, because let's face it, your only experience of driving in an amp weight arena is with split decision, and that's basically no experience at all.
Yeah.
I think once you get in a competitive fight with a controllable robot in that arena, you will start driving more cautiously. And I think I was going too far the other way, but it did seem to help me in a few fights. And the strategy that developed naturally for me was that I would drive around really slowly, really cautiously. And I think the other person would not realise how fast the robot was. Which meant that when I did go for it, and if I saw an opportunity, I would go for it. They wouldn't really see that coming and wouldn't have time to react. So if you look at my fight against Mini B, beautiful little Behemoth replica, love that robot, so happy to fight it. That's probably the best example of that working. And if you then watch my final fight against Potential Uplift, that's a perfect example of that not working.
Oh dear, yeah.
But it has given me some confidence in myself as a driver that I didn't previously have.
Yeah, you did super well, and like you actively won the fights as well. Like you did really well. Like that win against Mini B was beautiful. Like just a perfect pitting.
I was so happy with that when I watched it back. I really was. Because I mean that in fact pretty much all my fights except the first were against drivers more experienced than me by quite some way. And obviously there are always elements of, you know, potentially having a more drivable robot or a more controllable robot, or for me, the big thing was having the lower ground clearance. So there are definitely things where the robot has had an impact, but I can also look at those fights, especially Mini B, and go, I actively won that. Which is a really nice feeling that I've not really had with a robot before.
I'm glad you've had it now.
It's like, I technically won a fight with split decision, which is more than you can say. But that was other people failing to outlast the robot that couldn't drive in a straight line. It wasn't really me winning. It was just circumstances happening around me.
Yeah. I think not only is... I wonder, Tropical Storm Phil is a more successful robot than any of the other Team Spinnerproof robots that we've built. And I feel like, are you a more successful driver as well now at this point?
I mean, I must be, yeah. By quite some way. Because you've done all of the Hello There fights. And it really upsets me, by the way. I think Hello There is the best robot we've built. And it is also the one that hasn't won.
I'll tell you what, actually. Mine are sort of like follow-up and stuff on Kylo Wen. I did put caps across those motors, and it makes a big difference to the way that drives. And I think that if the a combination of the capacitors and a lighter wedge, and I think it would have been it's got so much potential, that robot, which makes it worse that it didn't do very as well as we wanted it to. But it's a quick robot, and it's so much potential there.
Would you want to run Kylo again?
I'd be curious to do it just to see if the modifications have made a difference in the arena. But
for the data, I want to do it, but I would not want to compete with it because I think, the joke of the weapon aside, it is a boring robot to watch and it is a boring robot to use.
Yeah, I agree, yeah. I mean, it's more fun when it's working properly. Like when it actually moves at the speed it's meant to move at and stuff, it is more fun to drive. But yes, I agree. I wouldn't necessarily want to compete with it, but it would be if it were possible to take it somewhere and just drive it in like a whiteboard or something, just to sort of see has this made any difference or not, it would be cool. But I suspect that what we'll actually do is gut it for parts at some point in the future. But yeah, fun.
I don't know if we will gut it though. I don't know if we have it in us to gut a robot like that.
I think if we're going to gut any of them, it's going to be this one.
Oh yeah, it would be the first on the block, but
I'm happy to grab parts from it because there's a lot of money on in the inside of that robot. It'd be nice to try and reclaim some of that for a more successful robot.
It also helps that it would be really easy to take parts out of compared to Hello There, especially.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Hello There nearly got some action at AWS 61, but unfortunately, the event running behind a bit didn't let that happen. I was very much looking forward to putting it in there with some ant weights, just so the hammer could finally do some damage.
It would have been so good to see that with a bunch of ant weights.
It could still have conspired to lose, I think.
I mean, does it fit in a pit? I guess you could sort of like wedge it in there and then it can't move, I suppose.
If the hammer was still working, I think you could probably get away from a pit just using the wall. But that's a big if.
Yeah. There's a lot of things going to line up perfectly for that to work.
So I guess the real question now is, has this made you want to build an ant?
Kind of. I don't know. The problem I have with ant weights is, I share your dislike for the 4-inch cube rule. I don't like that. So there's that, and there's also a sense of like, what would I want to build that would be that I would enjoy building and sort of using. So I've quite enjoyed building axes, but I don't think like axes don't scale well with weight class.
Not
I
at
think
all.
beetle weights, I think, are the smallest weight class that you can reasonably build an axe in. I think once you go smaller than that, you just can't get the power in there, I would guess. I mean, someone I'm sure will prove me wrong, but for the kinds of axes that I would like to build that have a bit more power to them.
I was going to say, you can build them, you just can't expect them to be useful.
Yeah, so I wouldn't want to like build an ant weight with a waggling stick, you know. I would. So anyway, and I've built axes before at this point. I'd like to do something new. The field is full of wedges. I wouldn't want to step on your toes with the front hinge wedge flipper. Leave that to you. I think the rear hinge flipper everyone does, and I wouldn't want to do that. It's another thing where, you know, you could try and build a 4-bar punch bot, but again, you know, do I want to do that? I don't know. I did consider so right. Bunch of things I don't want to do. The things that I've considered that would be interesting to me are a 4-bar punch bot with mechanism wheels, but I have no idea if you can get mechanism wheels that small. I doubt it.
Not cheaply, that's for sure.
So that would be interesting. And then the other ones that would be vaguely interesting, I guess, are spinners, just to sort of get a bit of experience building those things. I don't know whether I'd want to do a sort of horizontal one or a vertical one, but yeah.
I think ant weights make sense as the place to start playing with spinners. From both a cost perspective and, to a certain extent, a safety perspective.
Yeah. Well, see, you say from a like, I've given this some thought. So one of the ideas I had for a vertical spinner is to do a vertical spinner with like the thinnest blade I can possibly do.
The subtle spinner.
Exactly. And rather than try to sort of like chuck robots, is it possible to embed the weapon in them?
I mean, that doesn't sound like a very entertaining idea in many respects, but...
Oh, I'd find it funny, but then it terrifies me to have something that would just built to be a finger slicer. Like, what I'm thinking is basically, can I spin 2 scalpel blades at high speed?
I mean, there was a robot called Recycler, which had what was kind of a drum, but what it was basically a 3D printed drum into which long, thin metal inserts seemed to be put.
Oh, yeah.
Which you could do, I think, with scalpel blades.
Yeah. But I'm not sure I want to be building something so irresponsibly dangerous, so...
I mean, for what it's worth, I did see a robot that looks more inconvenient to handle than Split Decision was with the scalpel, and that was Hot Rod, which is the soldering iron robot. Which was immense fun to watch, and apparently not immense fun to smell.
Is it actually hot? You're allowed to melt robots, are you?
Yeah, literally. The fight started, and the tip of that thing just immediately started glowing with like this little drip of plastic coming off of it, presumably from its last fight. It was absolutely superb. I really hope I've got the name right there as well, but it was great fun to watch. And seeing the damage after, like the crispy bits of acetate on other robots. Loved it.
Deary me.
I want to clarify, by the way, when I said about sort of it being slightly safer to be doing an ant weight spinner, I mean in terms of you could realistically build something at home to contain it for testing if you wanted to. Or you can do what people seem to do, which is kind of do it outside and view from a distance, which obviously is not a perfectly safe approach, but the safety of doing that with an ant versus the safety of doing that with a beetle, there is a difference there, I feel.
Yeah, I think I could build a plywood box and it would be fine. Maybe it wouldn't be fine. If I wanted to build an arena, tell me what to build it out of. Someone who knows what they're doing. My first thought would be a plywood box with like some kind of transparent material on top that won't shatter immediately. I can't think of the name of it right now.
There is guidance out there. I think the AWS rules actually have guidance on materials that are suitable for an arena.
Ah, cool.
So I think that would actually be the place to look for that. I think people have done plywood test boxes even for beetles. But obviously it then needs to be larger, it's more inconvenient. There are a lot of things sort of stopping, I think, the average builder from bothering to do that, essentially. I think most people would rather not test than build a big test box they've got to store.
Yeah, that's the thing. Storing it is the biggest problem. You'd have to build it. You'd want to build it so that it was, or I'd want to build it so it could be flat packed again. But I imagine that's viable for ant weights, but gets less viable as you get heavier.
When you were talking earlier about reasons not to do certain types of flipper, I did wonder if you were going to suggest a side hinge.
A side hinge?
It's not completely unique. It's been done before, but I think that could have some genuine competitive use.
Oh, you could do... Oh, dude. I'm imagining like a Dracula-themed robot that has like coffin doors that open down the middle as the front of the robot. So like, if you imagine the coffin at like a 45 degree, not 45, but like the coffin at like a 30 degree angle or something, and then the doors open in the middle and it flips to either side.
Make it happen. And this is the nice thing with ants. I feel like you can have an idea like this, and it is a reasonable thing to try out.
Yeah.
The materials you're going to use to try that out, assuming that you'd use all the same electronics for any build, probably going to run you less than a tenner. Whereas the materials required to test that idea in a beetle, just in pure cost terms alone, it's a lot more.
I mean, we haven't built a beetle for less than 200 quid yet.
We haven't, but I mean... So with the electronics that I have in this robot, this is the third robot I've built with the same set of electronics and nothing else purchased. Oh, I did replace the servo actually from the old one, but I could have repaired that. It was only the wiring that was damaged. So the cost from robot to robot is very little. The initial cost is there, but for Phil, for example, I spent, I think, £5 on polycarb. I spent about £4 on titanium because titanium's expensive. I think there was £1's worth of steel in there as well. And then stuff like the motor mount that I used is another 50p, and just little bits like that. Whereas the HDPE I've bought today to start thinking about doing a beetle frame with, that on its own was 15 quid, and there's a bunch of other stuff that I'll need as well.
What, right? What have you bought recently? I feel like you've bought enough stuff to build like one robot in every weight class.
Yeah, I've built a whole heavy's worth of Hardox as well. Literally today in my break, I bought another amp weight's worth of electronics. So drive motors, a dual ESC and a receiver, because I only have one Nano 2 and I don't want to take it out of fill. And a couple of other spare bits that I needed, and the chassis materials for it. I've then also bought, I already have a beetle weight, a sort of reasonably sized receiver for a beetle weight. I bought some motors and wheels as a combo, just the sort of crappy ones. I bought some HDPE. And there was something else I bought as well that I can't quite remember right now. Oh, a amp weight receiver, of course, yeah. So I spent about 50 quid today on robot bits, just so that I have robot bits lying around to work with.
Awesome.
Thank you, tax rebate.
I haven't got a tax rebate in years, man.
This was from last year. I got this in like August. Just hadn't cashed it in. I'm an efficient man.
I don't know how tax rebates work, but I assume that basically the person in charge of my payroll does their job well, which means I don't get tax back.
You're not someone who's had multiple jobs through a year, or 2 jobs at once, or periods of very high earning and then periods of very low earning and things like that I have. It's all because of my summer work, basically.
Just making things complicated, man.
Hey, they seem to do all the maths for me, and I just either get money back or don't.
Imagine having a government that does that. America.
The only other country in the world.
No, it's just funny how I shouldn't hate on Americans.
You're not hating on Americans, just America. That's the difference.
True. Just the system under which they live, where the government knows how much tax they owe, refuses to tell people how much they owe, and then sends you to prison if you don't do it properly. It's madness. Madness the way tax works over there.
Talking of backwards countries and backwards systems, another thing that you mentioned was the Forage Cube.
Yeah?
I still don't like it, but I do feel a little bit better about it now I have seen a Forage Cube. It is bigger than you think. And for the robot I want to build next, I will be actively trying to game the cube a little bit. With this, I basically built it so that top down, it fits within a 4-inch square.
Yeah.
But actually you have a lot to gain by gaming those diagonals. I still think it's something that takes a lot of work to do well, but I'm going to give it a go and see how much length I can eke out of a robot.
So like I get that in terms of just volume, 4-inch cubed volume is plenty to work with, but it bothers me that unless you're willing to start doing fancy maths and work with diagonals, you're kind of limited to about 4 inches in any given dimension of your robot. I don't know how much you can push that if you game the diagonals, but like it's just like I don't know. I would like the flexibility to build a robot that's wider or taller and stuff like that. I just think it's just very restrictive, of the kinds of robots that you get, and it means that the field all looks, in some ways, quite similar because they're all about the same size, which isn't true of beetle weights or heavyweights.
Having seen how well the one unfolding robot did, I can understand why a size limit is in place. I can't remember the name of it. I'll link one of its fights in the show notes if I can. No disrespect to that robot, I rooted against it in most fights. Because it did seem like it was winning cheaply.
Okay.
It's a really cool mechanism. It's done incredibly well. It's executed superbly. But you kind of want the normal robot to win, which is so against the way I usually think.
Yeah, who even are you?
But it is one of those things, it's just kind of unfightable. And it feels like it takes a lot of fun out of the fight when one robot doesn't seem to have any counter for the other. And you're just waiting for a mistake that isn't going to happen because the driver is exceptionally talented.
I guess I'm sort of judging this mainly from the outside because I have never built a legal antweight. And I've obviously never competed in an antweight tournament, so I don't know the ins and outs of it all and stuff. It's just from an outside perspective, feeling like a 4-inch cube is annoying. But yeah, if size really is that much of an advantage, then I can then so be it. What are you laughing at? You laughing at size being an advantage?
Of course.
Of course you are. Do you find it funny if I managed to find a way to throw the word girth in there?
I mean, I was hoping you would.
Yeah. I mean, that was my attempt. That's it. That's as much effort as I'm willing to put into that joke.
I think the cube rule, again, now I've seen it in action, now I've seen the size of some other robots in person, seen the size of just the cube that is used to measure in person, it's not as intimidating as it once was. I don't think it has the potential to be off-putting for people who want to get into the class, which is where something like RoboNerd was really good for us.
Yeah.
It was like, here's a relaxed version of the rules that we're running, have fun with them. And we kind of went, yeah, that's something we can do. It might seem like a small thing, but I think that was genuinely quite big for us. And we ended up utilising it as well. I think if you go to something like the Bristol events, I think they're much more relaxed on it. But again, someone who's thinking, I want to build an antweight, the first thing they're going to do, or the first thing you hope they would do, is go and read the rules. And they're going to see that and go, what's this all about?
This is not the first thing that people would do.
It's the first thing that people should do. And I'm an idealist.
Okay, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you, but most people will not go and read the rules.
It's the first thing that the people we most want to not discourage would do. That was a grammatical sentence.
Flawless. I'm going to leave that in the recording just as it is.
Perfect. Yeah, I do think it's an intimidating thing. I understand why it's there. I'm not someone who's going to lobby to change it, but I do wonder if there are different ways of preventing people doing the overly weird stuff. Basically, I want to be able to do vertical spinner split decision, and I don't believe I could do it in the cube. I'm not sure I could do it at all, but...
That would be challenging. I mean, you couldn't do it, well, it depends how closely you want to match split decision. Obviously, the problem with split decision is that the wheels are 4 inches across. So automatically, you're outside of the limit, basically.
I want a thwack bot that sits upright. That's the limiting thing for me. And I don't know... I mean, I think you just have to experiment with it. I think it would be very difficult for us to get split decision to balance in the way it does if the motors were more centred within the body. Which means we either need to make things much more compact within the body, which I think we could do, but not by much. Actually, yeah, that is the only option. I don't know why I made it sound like there was a second thing there. We would have to make things more compact within the
Classic
body.
Ryan.
Or I suppose we'd have to sacrifice it doing that. And if we were doing the vertical spinner version, I think it would be really advantageous for it to be able to sit upright, spin up, and then just kind of nod its head down, rather than having to get a run up and swing over. That's much more difficult to drive, difficult to use. And if I'm going to do that design, I want to be able to get entertaining hits with it. Not go into an arena going, oh, look what this thing could potentially do, and then never do it. I realise the answer is get good, scrub.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all I've got to say.
But how do you get good with a robot you can't practice with?
Carefully.
Just chase the cat around with it.
So mean.
I don't want that to stay in now. That sounds like I might actually do that. We'll leave it as an open question.
Brilliant.
Another thing that you mentioned when you were talking
Oh, still more, okay.
was the amount of wedges.
The number of wedges.
The quantity of wedges. And I agree. Yeah. One of the things that, I wouldn't say it bothered me during the day, but one of the things that left me feeling a little unfulfilled was the fact I didn't get to face a spinner at any point. To the point where, when what turned out to be my final fight was coming up, they'd taken some really heavy damage in the fight before. And they were potentially not going to make the fight. Now, normally, I want to fight. I don't want to take a bye. But in my head, I was kind of thinking, you know what? I would take the bye if it meant I got a spinner.
Yeah.
And I don't like that I was thinking that way. That's mostly on me. Absolutely. But the fact that I'd sort of faced quite... I wouldn't say I'd faced quite similar designs. I'd faced the same class of robot over and over again, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, I had fought flippers. I felt like I'd kind of done flippers. I had fought wedges. I felt like I'd kind of done wedges. And I would have liked to have faced something different. However, my plan for another robot is to add another wedge to the world.
Shall I build a spinner for you to fight then?
Pretty much, yeah. Because then we can go to an event, and even if we both lose our first 2 fights, we can whiteboard over lunch.
Yeah.
Would you like to hear my future outmate plans?
Yes, of course I would.
They are twofold.
Okay.
Number 1, I of course would want to do an outweight hello there.
Yeah.
I have thoughts on doing that potentially with an actual motor for the weapon rather than a servo, to at least get some more impressive speed out of it. There are some really good grabbers that are just using an N20.
Yeah.
And they seem to actuate pretty quickly and give them enough torque to self-right. So I might start asking a few people some questions about specifically what gear ratios they're using on that and give it a go.
Yep.
But the one I'm more likely to do, I'm going to do purely based on the fact that I have a name for it.
You're going to reveal the name?
I want to do Wowbagger the Infinitely Pronged. Which would be the lowest profile wedge I could make with a lance. Possibly an actuated lance, but mostly I just want to see what the appeal of lances is. I don't want to use that name because it's brilliant. And I am sure that the vast majority of people don't know what it's from, and I'm okay with that.
I don't know what it's from, but it's still funny.
Oh yeah, part of the meta in Antweights is to come up with the longest name as well, so...
Okay.
I feel like I can't use Star Wars names, that's the thing.
I mean, you can.
No, it's not right.
You're entering as Team Spinnerproof, so I feel like you can.
I feel like it can only be a Star Wars name if we've both worked on the robot.
Okay.
I wouldn't stop you, but I would advise you to think carefully before you used one.
So I've got to come up with a name that's not Star Wars themed.
I mean, you've been talking about Maximum Effort for ages as a name.
I have, but Maximum Effort is a beetle weight that I think I will never build because the sort of defining characteristic of Maximum Effort is that it's the pursuit of perfection, and obviously the pursuit of perfection never even begins. So who knows if I'll ever build that.
But think about it. Between us, we have Star Wars as the shared media passion.
Yeah.
You've got your superhero films, which I know you're not going to argue with as a label.
How very dare you? They are broad, in-depth superhero films.
You have those, which you're into and I'm kind of not. And I've got The Hitchhiker's Guide. And that gives me... Well, first of all, I like it because it's another trilogy of... Oh, crap, it's not anymore. I was going to say it's another trilogy of 6, but Star Wars is now a trilogy of 9. Damn it.
Yeah.
It doesn't work anymore.
Well, is it 9?
It's a trilogy. Yeah, it's a trilogy of 6. Oh, hang on.
Or is it more like 4 at a push?
I mean, we can keep it as a trilogy of 6, but we've got to ditch one trilogy and never use a name from them. We've already used the prequels. We're committed to that. And we've kind of already used the Disney trilogy.
Damn it. We locked ourselves out of the only trilogy that's worth watching. No, we haven't. Well, so Hello There is a line spoken in A New Hope.
Yeah, but if we want to use Your Move after it, which we do.
Curses, what is...
Should we actually explain that now, by the way, for people that haven't got the reference?
I'm looking up the episode 4 script, and that will hopefully give away where Your Move came from.
So, to explain to people, and Sam may cut this may never make anyone else's ears, Your Move is Obi-Wan's next line after Hello There. And I will happily commit to just working my way through his part of the script for the rest of our robots.
I've just looked up the script, so, yeah. So, if we did the same scheme, instead of Your Move, we'd end up with either Come Here, My Little Friend, or maybe just Come Here.
Come Here, My Little Friend is actually not a bad robot name and would totally fit in the spirit of Outweights. That's a genuinely good Outweight name.
Yeah. Well, there we go. There's a Star Wars-themed Antweight name that we can use.
But Wowbagger the Infinitely Pronged, I am now personally committed to.
That is... Yeah, you can't do that. R2 is written... In this script, it is written ARTOO.
Yeah. I'm fairly sure it's like that on some subtitled versions as well. I'm guessing you've never watched with subtitles.
No, I don't. Never really needed to. Interesting.
This is a self-indulgent tangent, wasn't it?
Well, most of our tangents are.
Most of the non-tangents are as well.
Dear, I'm trying to think of a name for an antweight. Because I feel like you, I feel like I need a name before I can really get committed to something.
The name is what attaches me to an idea and gets me to follow through on it.
Yeah, because we name, like, we've for both the Beatles we've built, the name has come pretty early on in the process.
Hello There didn't come that early.
Hello There was a bit later, to be fair, but like we started the build because of a name that we found funny.
Have we ever spoken about that publicly?
I don't think so, no.
So the original plan for Hello There was a Jar Jar Binks themed hammer, which we slowly realised was going to be far too similar to Nelly.
Yeah.
It was an idea that was basically reliant on ears. And that was just too close to their brand in the end.
Well, yeah, because we were going to call our robot Jar Jar Bonks and have big ears. And it's like, yeah, it would be treading on toes in our view, and we didn't want to do it. So we had to switch.
And, you know, if you're trying to get accepted to Bogglerbots in particular, not the best toes to be treading on, are they? And we ended up with something that I think is so much better. And it didn't tie us into an aesthetic which would have held the robot back, because it had enough going against it as was.
Yeah. But Kylo was really early, like...
Oh yeah, because we initially just had Kylo. It was the when that came later, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. So we went with Kylo, and it was, yeah, when was what really sold it. It was like, yes, this is the name we're going with.
Tropical Storm Phil is very well known. Didn't Split Decision also come name... I think name and idea came hand in hand, didn't they?
Yeah, they did, yeah. From you.
I mean, all our best ideas do.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Now, to be fair, Hello There being a hammer in the first place was your doing. If only to stop me making us do Split Decision.
That was the compromise, wasn't it? It was like, I refuse to build a Beetleweight version of that robot, so let's do something else.
Sam was all like, I refuse to build an uncompetitive robot, and instead we built a robot that still doesn't want to fight.
Look, look here. Hello There has the potential to be competitive.
Here's a question. I've referred to Hello There as not having won a fight a few times now, and people have argued that either the J fight we should award ourselves, which, I mean, we won that, but no, or we could claim the 7-way as our fight, because we were technically announced winners.
The pity victory? I think not.
The win that was awarded to us purely because it was being filmed on your phone.
Oh, dear. It's not won a fight in tournament.
But think about it, that would be a better first win than the Bourbon win was. You got a choice to make now.
No, it's got to be in tournament. It's got to be an official win in a tournament.
I'd take a win in a whiteboard if it had proper judges in place. I think if it's a fight with a referee and judges, I'm counting it whether it's in a tournament or not.
Okay, well, you and I have differing opinions on what counts as wins then.
This is something I've had to work out before. When a friend of mine was trying to do 100 football matches in a season, we had to define what counted as a football match.
Oh, God.
Because you could just walk past a school playground, see kids playing football and count that. So we had to work out the sort of dividing line of what was or wasn't an official match. Like, would a Sunday League game count? No, it wouldn't. We eventually decided 3 impartial officials.
I don't understand how you could have the sentence, a Sunday League game doesn't count. Because, like, league game sounds official. Is it the fact it's on a Sunday that doesn't count? What's special about that football match that it's got, like, its own title that you can just reference offhand like that, no problem, but not have it count as an official football game?
So it is a football match, but it's whether you count it as something you have attended at that point. If you're trying to go to a certain number of games in a season, it's like, how unimportant a game is too unimportant to count.
I'm getting sucked into this. I don't understand how you can watch... How can you be in attendance of any football match and not go and say, this doesn't count?
If, for example, it wasn't a 90-minute match, if it were... So a children's match, for example, I wouldn't count. You know, bearing in mind that on this list are, like, full international fixtures. You can't be at Wembley with a crowd of 90,000 for one game and then be watching your son play on a Sunday the next and call them the same thing.
You absolutely can. It's all football.
I mean, they did ignore what I was saying and went with a more lenient interpretation that you would probably have liked more, so there's that.
So what... Can you just explain to me then what... So you said... Am I getting this right? Sunday League match or something? So,
a Sunday League match...
Yeah, what is that?
So to understand Sunday League, you first have to understand Saturday League. Saturday League is...
Before that, you've got to understand Friday League.
And then there's Sheffield Wednesday. It all gets out of hand. So,
no, right, go on. Saturday League, then.
Saturday League is everything from the top level of professional football down to the... And we're just talking in England here. Down to the... 1, 2... 3, down to the 13th level, I think it is.
Okay.
Where games are played traditionally on a Saturday. And that takes in everything from the sort of highly paid professionals all the way down to people who are either earning very little as a part-time wage or just earning nothing.
Can you have Saturday League games that are not played on a Saturday?
Yes. You'll get some on midweeks and everything. Sunday League is the point at which players start paying to play. Okay.
I can see why you'd pick that as an inflection point there.
It is part of a league, that has people who kind of administrate it, but a lot of the responsibility is taken by the teams to kind of organise things amongst themselves. So they're organising hiring a pitch somewhere to play the game. They're being assigned a referee, but rather than the referee being paid by the league, the teams are sort of making sure that everyone gives the ref a fiver kind of thing. That's the rough dividing line. Some of that may not be as true now as it once was. I think the lines have definitely been blurred, but that's still the sort of easiest line of distinction to draw.
So I was going to come up with a stupid joke.
Say it.
When will the lines be Blink 182'd?
I don't get it, but I'm sure it's hilarious.
Well, you said the lines were blurred.
Oh. I mean, Oasis would have been a funnier one to go with.
It would have been.
You could have at least gone with Britpop of some kind. I'd have taken Pulp.
I'm not familiar. It was just that was the first band that sprung to my mind. It made me laugh. And you're right, there are better jokes to be made from there, but I am not a comedian, as I'm sure everyone listening has figured out by now.
Better jokes are available.
Yeah. Subscribe to our Patreon for better jokes. You can have that one for free.
For absolute clarity, we do not have a Patreon.
No, we don't. We don't have a Patreon.
I don't remember how we got here.
I don't know. It's not the destination that matters, Ryan. It's the journey.
And I'm not sure if the journey was that good.
On this journey, I have learned about football and Saturday League games that are played on Wednesdays.
And sometimes Sundays.
And of course they are. And how not to make music jokes around someone who knows music better than you do. Or I do in this case. One does. I've learned a great many things.
And now we've got to transition out of this. Thanks for that, Sam.
Maybe I name my Antweight Blurred Lines just to wind you up.
I'm not sure you want to go down that road as a reference.
No? Why not?
The song Blurred Lines is not pleasant.
Oh, is it? Okay, right. I won't do that then. This is once again my lack of music knowledge is hurting me. What about Blink 182 lines?
I mean, it's a little better. I'm trying to think if there's any sort of opinions about Antweights that I'm yet to express.
I don't know.
I guess the one thing remaining to say is I sort of came into this saying I wasn't sure how much I was going to enjoy competing. Didn't necessarily enjoy the build process as much as I would have hoped. The one thing I always knew I was going to enjoy was being there. And meeting people and hanging out with people I already know and enjoying some fights live. And it absolutely lived up to those expectations. Obviously, numbers were a bit down. Some of the atmosphere was a bit weird because there's loads of other stuff going on in the world. But it was still a great day of fighting robots. And I think I could happily have gone out after 2 defeats and still enjoyed the day.
Awesome.
Which is a skill that I've had to acquire.
Yeah, advantages to building rubbish robots. You get good at enjoying days despite that.
One thing I would do differently next time, very simply, is take multiple robots. It's always kind of blown my mind that people can juggle having 4 robots. But actually, with the lack of damage you generally take, the only maintenance I was doing was battery charging and making myself self-right properly.
Yeah. Interesting.
And of course, it would be great if I do another one if you could come along as well. Team it up. Maybe you have your own Antweight, then we'd have like a team of 3. Potentially fight each other in competition would be amazing.
That'd be a laugh, yeah. Well, if we do if an event is organised in a month that's less busy for me, or at least it was was busy when it was organised anyway, then maybe I'll do it.
If nothing else, I mean, I don't want to tell you how to live your life, but RoboNerd does Antweights.
It does. The problem, right? My issue with the Antweights at RoboNerd is that arena is never level, and I'm bored of being slowly and inexorably pulled towards one of those corners.
Well, that's another thing that I hadn't realised until I went to this, is that arena is actually quite small. The arena at AWS is big. I think it's 1 metre by 1.3.
Ah, cool.
So there's a lot more room for activities.
Yeah.
On that note, anything else? Thoughts, feelings, statements? facts, opinions.
Opinions? I'm not really known for having opinions, me.
I am, but only for their consistency.
No, I have no other thoughts and feelings.
Well, if this is a whole episode, I guess you should give it an outro.
Oh, I suppose I should really, shouldn't I? What episode are we on?
That's a you problem, not a me problem.
Spinnerproof.com. This will be 71, blimey.
Wait, we've only made one since the Big 6-9.
Yeah. Yeah. The last episode we made was
Episode 70.
nearly a month ago.
What?
Yeah.
Why?
Why?
I just don't... I'm surprised that we've waited that long to record again.
I've been waiting for Ratunkti.
Well, more fool you.
To be fair, like until the world went to poo, I wouldn't have had time to record anyway. Like
That's true.
was in principle very busy around now, but yeah.
Let's say, if schools in the UK close, expect a lot of Ratunkti.
Yeah, expect Ratunkti to start happening. Right then, before we get dragged into that topic of great anxiety...
oh yeah, sorry.
You can find the show notes for this episode at spinnerproof.com/episodes/71. And there you can find links to the various things, what we have been talking about today. You can also tweet to us. No, you can find... No.
You have done this before.
Find a link. This has gone so wrong.
This is all going in as is.
Oh, you can also find a link to our Twitter at Spinnerproof, where you can tweet to us the last time I got that outro correct, because I don't think it's been for a while.
I mean, you've done it pretty well on other people's podcasts.